Morning, good afternoon, or evening, depending on where this finds you, and a warm welcome to all of you to this UNIDIR event on the BWC at 50, taking stock and looking ahead. At the outset, I should note that this event is being recorded and we'll make that recording available in the coming days. To provide a little bit of context, last week the international community marked a significant milestone with the 50th anniversary of the BWC. Over the past 5 decades, the BWC has become the bedrock of global efforts to prevent the development and production of biological weapons. It plays a crucial role in ensuring that advancements in the life sciences serve only peaceful purposes and fostering innovation while safeguarding humanity. In my view, if this treaty did not exist, we would urgently need to create it. And in today's geopolitical climate, negotiating such a broad agreement would be extremely difficult. I think this makes the BWC something which is particularly important and something to nurture over the next 50 years. It is also an area where UNIDIR has been active over the course of the past couple of years. Indeed, this is the 6th in a series of webinars that we have co-organized with our colleagues over in UNODA and also working with the Friends of the Chair. It started last year. There's 6 events are all available online. My colleague had just put a link in the chat, and we'd encourage you to go and have a look at those. The working group itself that was established in the BWC Review Conference has met for 5 sessions, the last one in December, and has 4 more to go until the end of 2026. For today's event, we hope to be able to discuss progress within the working group as a whole and perhaps outline some next steps for states parties to consider in looking to reinforce what is a critical treaty. To this end, I am delighted to be joined by the chair of the working group, Ambassador Federico Meyer, who will deliver some opening remarks on his work and his vision, and have the privilege to invite the friends of the chair who have also generously given some of their time to join us today, and ask them to provide brief updates on the respective agenda items under the working group. Towards the end, I will open up the discussion for questions. To do so, please do submit questions through the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. We really do welcome these, and I'll get to as many as I can after the round of presentations. And with that, I propose we begin the session, and I'm delighted to give the floor to Ambassador Meyer for his opening remarks. Ambassador, thank you for joining us today, and the screen is yours, sir.
Okay. Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends, let me begin by thanking UNIDIR and James Revel for organizing this timely webinar and for their continued support in promoting thoughtful and well-informed reflections on the agenda of the working group on the strengthening of the BWC. I'm also especially pleased to extend in this open forum my deep appreciation to the Friends of the Chair. The work of this group has greatly benefited from the dedication, precision, and professionalism of a remarkable group of diplomats and scientists. Their contributions have ensured that the working group has remained a genuinely member-driven process, technically sound, substantively balanced, inclusive in format, and guided throughout by transparency and common purpose. We meet today to take stock. The first 5 sessions of the working group have been rich in substance. State parties have produced an important volume of proposals and suggestions across the full range of the 7 topics mandated by the 9th Review Conference. We know where we stand. What lies ahead is the phase of developing recommendations. With the great assistance from the ISU, we, the Bureau, and the Friends of the Chair, are drafting potential language for a rolling text. The goal is to facilitate convergence. If successful, this effort will allow delegations to review options side by side, to consider concrete formulations, and to identify areas where consensus can realistically be shaped. Parallel to this, the process continues to advance on two particular mature tracks: the future mechanisms on international cooperation and assistance, and on scientific and technological review. These are no longer abstract notions. Their structure, functions, and potential mandates have been thoroughly discussed. They are, in many respects, the best defined deliverables of the process to date. As has been emphasized by several experts contributing to the BWC at 50 reflections, such mechanisms, once operational, can serve as vital building blocks for a future system of verification. The scientific landscape is evolving fast. The BWC must have the institutional capacity to stay informed, to assist state parties, and to act swiftly and credibly when required. To do so, we must equip the Convention with practical tools, not with grand designs, but with functional arrangements that respond to real-world needs. This is why the Friends of the Chair are now working with renewed focus. Each of the 7 agenda items present its own challenges, but also a reservoir of already identified ideas. Over the coming months, the objective will be to convert these ideas into draft measures, wherever feasible, and to begin assembling a document that can be circulated ahead of the 6th session as a possible rolling text. As chair, I remain committed to transparency and balance, but this is not a passive exercise. Progress depends on engagement. If delegations make use of the technical groundwork already done and engage seriously with the drafting work now in motion, the meaningful results will be within reach. This webinar is an excellent opportunity to keep our constituencies informed. It's also a chance to reaffirm our shared interest in a stronger, more functional convention. The BWC at 50 has shown resilience. It now calls for renewal. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ambassador, both for your encouraging words and the overview of the way forward with the rolling text, which I think was extremely useful and helpful for many in this call to get an update. So very much appreciated. Thank you, sir. You also mentioned mechanisms, which allows me to seamlessly transfer to our first friend of the chair representative, who will speak on mechanisms for international cooperation. In this regard, I'm delighted to give the floor to Mr. Thomas Fetz, who is Deputy Permanent Representative to the Conference of Disarmament of the Permanent Mission of Canada, and along with Hope Reyes from the Philippines are the Friends of the Chair on International Cooperation and Assistance Mechanism. For more on this, over to you, Thomas, and thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I trust you can hear me. Very good, thank you. Good day, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say at the beginning that I'm speaking in my personal capacity and not for the Government of Canada. Elections have been called recently, so that's even more of a reason for me to speak in a personal capacity and not for the Government of Canada. I want to thank UNIDIR and UNODA, in particular the ISU, for strongly supporting this working group and for organizing this webinar. Of course, I also want to thank Brazil, in particular Ambassador Romero and his predecessor, Ambassador D'Amico, and the Brazilian team for working with us and leading us on this process. Now, as well, of course, my colleague Hope Reyes and my Canadian colleague Trevor Smith, who are also friends of the chair on international cooperation and assistance. Now, we have been asked to take stock on international cooperation and assistance, and I want to underline first, as was noted by Jamie, the convention remains in force. The norm against biological weapons stands. And no matter what we do in this working group, we have to keep that in mind. So now it's a matter of strengthening the convention. And in my particular case, it is in relation to international cooperation and assistance. International cooperation and assistance is taking place within the BWC. The ISU is supporting various projects to that effect. We have a database that assists states in seeking assistance and states in offering assistance. And now it's a matter of strengthening this institutional framework. Now, the RevCon of 2022, the review conference, has tasked the working group with setting up a mechanism on international cooperation and assistance. And it is my belief that we can successful in that if we focus on the doable and demonstrate a willingness to compromise in setting up this particular mechanism. And I believe if we focus around projects that are to be funded by a trust fund, and these projects are designed to support international cooperation and assistance, this is something we can do. We are not the only ones who have a trust fund that supports the aims and objectives of a particular organization. There are many others out there, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn and adopt best practices from others. And this is what we have tried to do when we developed the Friends of the Chair paper. And we have put that to states to look at it. And of course, discussions continue. We are not going to be successful if we pursue wish lists and try to solve challenges which have been proven impossible to solve in the BWC framework and in many other forums. For example, we are not going to resolve every issue related to export controls, every issue related to sanctions, and matters that belong to other organizations. For example, the BWC working group is not going to set the stage for building a pharmaceutical industry in every country and assuring every country that it will have all the vaccines it needs when the next pandemic breaks out. We can be successful within the BWC if we stay within our lane, but also do not get in the way of others like the WHO. Of course, that doesn't mean we can't lay the foundations for discussing some of the challenges that we have and potentially for allowing the higher level bodies like review conferences or the meeting of states parties to look at possible solutions. But we are not going to solve all these external issues, as I would call many of them, within the mandate of this working group, which after all has less than 2 years left. And ideally, the review conference has tasked us to adopt a mechanism in international cooperation and assistance as soon as possible, possibly by 2025, and the mechanism could then be adopted through a special conference if we are ready to do that. Of course, we also have to keep in mind the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which is, of course, the status quo. As I mentioned, international cooperation and assistance is already taking place. The Global Partnership is doing a lot of international cooperation and assistance in support of the BWC, and so do many states in other formations of states or bilaterally. And of course, we have, as I mentioned, international organizations like the WHO, World Animal Health, etc., who are working in the fields that the BWC has left to some extent vacant because we could not agree on further strengthening the BWC up until now. But hopefully that will change. Now, the Friends of the Chair have outlined a way forward, as I mentioned, and there is the Friends of the Chair paper out, and the Chair has further adapted our proposals and issued his own paper during the last meeting of the working group in December. I'm not going to go into all the details. I think they're known. I'm happy to discuss them during the Q&A if needed. Looking ahead, the chair has already signaled what remains to be done. The review conference has not only tasked us with setting up the two mechanisms, one on ICA and one on science and technology, but the working group has been tasked with looking at recommendations with respect to all the 7 topics as outlined by the chair. So the Friends of the Chair on international cooperation and assistance are also looking at possible further measures in addition to setting up the ICA mechanism, and to work on developing recommendations on the basis of working papers and proposals that have been submitted by states. The Friends of the Chair will provide our thoughts to the chair, and then we are in the hands of the chair as to how he wants to take that forward. And of course, we look forward to continuing to work with all delegations and to take any questions that they may have. So thank you very much. Back to you, Jamie.
Many thanks, Thomas, for the overview and the update of where we are. Also duly noted you're speaking in your personal capacity, and my apologies for forgetting Trevor as the third part of your Friends of the Year Chair team there. I'd now like to turn to science and technology developments and related mechanisms. And to do this, I'm delighted to give the floor to Peter Ahabwe. Peter is an epidemic intelligence analyst for Uganda National Institute of Public Health. He is also a friend of the chair on issues related to science and technology developments and the mechanism. Thank you for joining us, Peter, and over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Are you getting me clear? Yeah, so for many of you who have been attending the BWC meetings or watching them on UNWeb TV, science and technology has been a very consistent theme, pretty much from the beginning of the convention. It's the impetus and the drive for the very creation of the convention. But sadly, even today as we speak, we have not ground on having a clear mechanism. Together with my fellow friends of the chair, we also submitted a non-paper, and we have also been part of the chair's current efforts to move forward with the chair's proposal in December, but also all ongoing efforts, as chair mentioned before, to have some rolling text ready. And a few things to note. It's very important that we've seen that it's very important that while it's easy to look at science and technology in a silo, a lot of the science and technology issues have linkages with other focus areas. For example, with the ICA mechanism, science and technology already at the bare minimum has 2 meetings with the hybrid model, which seems to have broad support. You already have the larger group meeting and then the smaller group meeting. And if we're able to further resolve issues about reporting lines and any feedback loops, there could be space for even more meetings. If you add temporary working groups to deal with ad hoc issues or specialist issues, or really black swan, quickly emerging issues, you could have even many more meetings. These meetings have to be done alongside the normal.
Peter, you're breaking up slightly, or my connection is dropping, but I think it may be yours. Maria, could you confirm it's not just me?
Yes, Peter's connection has been broken. We'll be working on it, but I think he's back now.
Please go ahead, Peter.
I'm sorry, Jamie, I'm connecting from the field for the Ebola response. So sorry for the connectivity issue. But yes, Jamie. So I was saying that, so the issue that we have is we need to figure out how do we resolve the issues between the larger group and the smaller group, the sequencing and the timing, the programming, what does the larger group do? What does the smaller group do? In essence, if you look even just to 2019, where you had a lot of interest in gene drives and their potential effects, you had the whole mess with CRISPR before, and even now we are talking about AI bio. The thing is, these are specific scientific problems, but the tools of diplomacy, the tools of negotiation never really change. And it's important that we build mechanisms that are resilient, mechanisms that are fit for purpose, mechanisms that will not only work for the next 5 to 10 years, but will work in perpetuity, as the BWC has no expiry date as we speak. So that's the challenge that we have ahead of us. We are eagerly working with the other FOCs, we are working with the chair, we're working with the ICU, and we've also taken efforts to have bilaterals with groups, with regional groups, informals, but also with some member states. And as all other members of the Bureau, we remain available to answer questions, remain available to guide or to advise, and also we mostly remain available to listen as we are part of Chair's team. You can come to us as well if you have something to say or an idea. We can also move it along. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter, for taking the time to join us while you're in the field and for the overview. I particularly the point on building mechanisms that are resilient and fit for purpose, I think is then extremely important. Colleagues, I would encourage you, if you have questions for our speakers, please do submit them in the Q&A part of the chat here. We will get to them shortly, but for now, though, I'd like to turn to our next set of speakers, which is going to be Laurent Majerman and Angel Horner, who are friends of the chair on confidence building measures and transparency. I don't know if, do you want to go first, Laurent?
Yes, thank you, Jimmy. I will kickstart this brief update on discussions on CBM and transparency in the context of the working group. And my colleague from Peru will take over midway, just for our colleagues to not be surprised. So let me start by just giving you a brief update of basically what has been done and where we stand. Consideration on CBMs were the subject of initial discussions over a one-day period in December 2023, followed by a second one-day meeting in 2024. The initial meeting took the form of a general exchange on CBMs and transparency, and they were very useful to the furniture the chair to develop a baseline. The initial discussion underscored the value of CBMs for the convention, that they are a key mechanism to prevent ambiguities, doubts, and suspicion, that they contribute to build trust, and they have a whole set of other benefits beside their intended purpose, like including promoting closer cooperation at national level among stakeholders when they have to prepare the yearly CBM returns. The discussion have also underscored that CBMs cannot be and are not intended to replace or play the role of a verification regime. This is why we have different tracks to work, or different streams to work on verification and CBM/transparency in the context of the working group. And this is why these streams have remained largely separate. Maybe more important, initial discussions have underlined the general sense that CBM should be preserved, that they should be reinforced where possible and appropriate. And a number of proposals have been made to that effect as part of statements or working papers. And on the basis of these initial discussions, the friends of the chair have sought to structure the different proposals to strengthen CBMs and transparency in the form of a document that was at the center of the discussion of the 2024 meeting. And with my colleague from Peru, we have identified 5 different domains for focused discussion to strengthen CBM and transparency in the intent that we can gradually develop convergence and land on some recommendation. And those 5 different domains, and I will start listing them, and then my colleague from Peru will take over. The first set of measures that may be considered are measures to increase participation in CBMs. And this is an objective that is broadly shared by state parties. Progress has been made in this domain over the years, but there's still a lot to be done before there's universal participation in CBMs. The possible measures in this domain are mostly technical and not political per se, and there's a whole set of measures that could be considered and taken forward, including providing guidance and support to the states parties, facilitating the reporting process, easing the burden, or increasing incentives for participation. The second domain we have identified that could be the object of recommendation, or at least that should be considered for recommendation, because the institutionalization of a regular review of CBMs. The point was made repeatedly by the delegation that there's a need to ensure that CBMs remain up to date and fit for purpose, and that CBMs have remained by and large static and unchanged since their establishment more than 30 years ago. And to that effect, there could be value in having a process under the BWC to review them especially from a technical point of view on a regular basis. And there are different options to that effect, and something that we need to look in great detail what would be the most effective and efficient process to do so. I will now pass on the floor to through you, James, to my colleague from Peru.
Thank you, Laurent. I also realized I never introduced you, but just to provide some context, Laurent is Councillor with the Permanent Mission of Switzerland to the UN in Geneva. Thank you for taking the time to join us, Laurent. Angel, I can turn to you now. And you are the Minister Councillor with the Permanent Mission of Peru. Thank you for joining us, Angel. The screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and also the usual caveat of speaking on a personal capacity rather than national. And good afternoon, colleagues, and good morning or good evening, wherever you are. Building on what Laurent just mentioned, I will now focus on 3 key areas that are the other 3 out of the 5 themes that we have identified. First is the issues regarding expanding the scope of existing CVMs and adopting new ones, then leveraging CVM information, and finally establishing new transparency mechanisms. Regarding the expansion and adoption of CVMs, we need to update and refine CVMs in order to enhance clarity and effectiveness. Some proposals include for instance, simplifying Form 0 to improve usability, revising Form A to ensure biodefense research, reporting that includes both military and civilian programs, expanding Form E to cover national implementation measures and exports of genetically modified organisms. And there are also proposals regarding vaccine production facilities, human and animal, and also military biomedical activities abroad. So these are the set these are some of the measures that have been proposed in that aspect. Then the other category of measures have to do with leveraging CVM information, and in this regard, our idea is to maximize the impact of submitted data. The options include, for instance, tasking the ISU with analyzing CVM submissions to identify trends and support national implementation, establishing a process for states parties to periodically review each other's CVMs, promoting dialogue and consistency. So these are some of the options that we have received. And the third category of options have to do with strengthening transparency. So confidence building extends beyond CVMs, as we all know, and additionally, voluntary measures can enhance trust and cooperation. Therefore, we are looking here at implementation reviews, voluntary peer review exercises, transparency visits, and biosafety and biosecurity management systems. There is also a proposal to establish a platform under the BWC to engage best practices and provide support for national implementation. This could be a key step forward. Looking ahead, Jamie and everyone, our work includes 2 meetings in August 2025. We will meet twice this year, and then one in 2026 in order to discuss all these proposals. If adopted, they will set the foundation for stronger, more institutionalized confidence building under the BWC, the 15th anniversary of which we commemorate today thanks to this event. So my final message is, let's seize the opportunity to enhance transparency, cooperation, and trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anel, and thank you, Laurent. It seems there is a lot to consider in that agenda item, but thank you for laying out the options and the planning. I'd like to be able to turn to a simpler topic now, but unfortunately the next topic is compliance and verification, and I'm going to turn to Bas Blau for an overview of that. Bas is the first secretary to the permanent representation of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva, and along with the ambassador from the Netherlands, Robert Indenbosch, and Mr. Alonso Ruiz of Mexico, they are leading work on compliance and verification. So good luck, and over to you, Bas.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Jamie. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen, many thanks to UNIDIR and UNODA for organizing this event for the 50th anniversary of the BWC. Let me add to that my gratitude to our chair, Ambassador Meyer, for his guidance and steering of our work. Speaking also on behalf of my Mexican colleague, Alonso Martinez, who was co-facilitator on compliance and verification, I think I can say we look back at an excellent and constructive discussion last December. In very general terms, the main takeaway from previous discussions, as well as from consultations and workshops that followed throughout the year, is the importance allegations attached to the concept of compliance and verification. At the same time, given that the topic has not been formally discussed for over 2 decades, the discussions are at a more exploratory stage than those on other topics. This gives a certain positive momentum to our discussions, and I want to emphasize that states parties have really put in the effort. In addition to serious discussions in the formal plenaries, several working papers and side events have helped us explore practical approaches to developing compliance and verification measures. Taking stock of a few challenges. As you know, unlike other major disarmament treaties, the BWC does not have a mechanism for verifying compliance among state parties. This means there is no formal mechanism for inspecting states' facilities, auditing biological activities, or ensuring that they comply with the BWC. Since many biological technologies have legitimate civilian uses, such as in medicine, agriculture, and research, one challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate activities and those that could be used for activities prohibited under the Convention. Another issue is that adequate resources are necessary for the effective monitoring and verification of compliance. Many states parties may lack the resources to implement robust monitoring programs or to support international verification efforts on their own. And then there's the biggest challenge, the challenge of emerging technology. Biological landscape is constantly changing. Novel pathogens, emerging biotechnologies, and synthetic biology present new challenges in the domain of compliance and verification. In particular, advances in biotechnology may increase the ability of state and non-state actors to develop biological weapons in small or improvised laboratories, further complicating verification efforts. Then taking stock of a few opportunities. The issue of compliance and verification has been examined since the BWC came into force, throughout its review conferences, as well as the work of the ad hoc group and VERIX. Insights from this previous work remain valuable. However, the context in which state parties last considered this topic over 2 decades ago has changed significantly. It is therefore necessary to address current challenges with a fresh perspective. Another recurring theme is the possibility to learn from other international organizations. Although there are some lessons to be learned, it is also very clear that the domain covered by the BWC is vastly different from, for instance, the chemical and nuclear domains. International organizations like the World Health Organization and the World Organization for Animal Health and others could support future verification efforts by providing expertise, training, and technical support. Last and perhaps most important for the context of our work, what we gather from the discussions is that there is a general will among states parties to improve verification within the BWC. Some state parties put emphasis on preventive measures, while others value the idea of post-facto investigation, or a combination of different measures. Nevertheless, there is a broad recognition of the need to strengthen the BWC to fully reflect the context we now find ourselves in. So where do we go from here? When we consider our mandate, our job is to identify, examine, and develop specific and effective measures, including possible legally binding measures, and to make recommendations to strengthen and institutionalize the Convention in all its aspects. The way we read this is that we should work primarily on what we will ultimately present to the 10th Review Conference. We have therefore attempted to start with this last December with a food for thought paper. Under the guidance of the chair, we will continue to consult state parties and relevant stakeholders to further update what should ultimately become the working group's recommendations to the review conference in 2027. This will not be an easy task, as there are still divergences to bridge. Examples include the scope of verification. So, for example, which articles of the conventions would be included in a verification mechanism, the possible role of on-site inspections, which is a sensitive topic for many and something others really want to see, the extent to which we should or should not, as my colleagues from the CBM topic explained, explore the possible linkages with confidence-building measures, but also national implementation, and the institutional and financial implications of possible future verification measures. Ultimately, these discussions will have to be boiled down to something that is politically acceptable, technically feasible, and financially sustainable. This is not a matter we can already resolve in the working group. After all, VERIX had more weeks per year than we have hours. This is why we had already included the idea to recommend a working platform to work on these issues in the future. But this is something that we will also look forward to discuss in August. In closing, let me reiterate that the friends of the chair are in the hands of the room. We look forward to today's discussion and future discussions so that we can support getting the BWC ready for at least another 50 years. I thank you.
Many thanks, Bas. I think this is an area where there's been real progress in terms of an important conceptual discussion, but I'd also echo the point you raise on having a fresh perspective that takes into account the current context. I didn't realize, but you're right, of course, it's more weeks per year in terms of VERIX than you have hours per year, so thanks for that factoid as well. Thank you, Bas. Okay, I'm starting to get some comments in the Q&A section. We will get to those, but before doing so, I'm delighted to now give the floor to the friend of the chair on national implementation, Athikan Dilokwathana, who is councillor to the permanent mission of Thailand to the UN in Geneva. Athikan, thank you for joining, and the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. First and foremost, I wish to thank UNIDIR-UNODA for organizing this event and inviting me to join an esteemed panel today. I also join others in expressing appreciation towards Ambassador Mir and Ambassador Domingo and also his team for his guidance, as well as thanks for UNODA and ISU through this process. Besides me, I have an honor to co-facilitate the discussion on national implementation with my colleague Rizky from Indonesia, Claudia from Australia, Gritzel from Panama, and Faith from Uganda. Let me start with the taking stock. It is clear that when we talk about taking stock of national implementation, we might start from the evolution of the Biological Weapons Convention. There's almost been a shift from our focus preliminarily. When we talk about implementation, we talk about the penal legislation only, the norm that prohibit the use of the biological weapons. But now it's shifts to include a number of other possible topics which are linked to the biological weapons itself. To give you some example, the state party had a discussion on code of conduct on biorisk assessment in 2008. And over years, the discussion have been expanded to other related topics, including public health, trade, and other emerging technologies like cybersecurity. So we could see that the obligations on the national implementations extended beyond the Article 4. However, it is not clear that the national implementation should be reflected in which specific term, and the conventions itself leave the room for great implementation on reflective of the evolving circumstances that can be taken into account when state would like to implement their obligation under the BWC. And during the BWC meetings, especially during the working group on the strengthening of the BWC in 2023, as well as during the informal discussions and our engagement with several regional groups, state party agree that scope of national implementation is based on the text itself and additional understandings and agreements reached during successive review conferences and meeting of state parties and practice as in the measure that state already adopted. For example, it could be intersect with the measure to ensure safety and security of biological agents and toxins in laboratories. Also, measures on transportation to prevent unauthorized access to and removal of such agents and toxins. Measure on education and awareness raising of those working with biological agents, as well as the measure on enhancing cooperation and assistance with other countries. And also the legislation can be included such a measure, for example, the confidence building measures. In implementing the convention, states also recognize that there's a complementarity effect of the BWC and other international instruments, including the resolution of the UNSC 1540 and other terrorism conventions. Furthermore, the nature of the obligation of BWC share the similarity with those under CWC. So that's why some of the state, instead of introducing the sole implementing laws, they could introduce as well the complex national implementing laws. And since other colleagues have mentioned earlier about the threat of emerging disruptive technologies, I wish to share as well, some countries now adopted the specific policy guidance or code of conduct to regulate dual-use research with measures related to cyber biosecurity. In terms of enhancing the national implementation, the state parties also establish or nominate the national focal points. As of summer last year, there are 147 state parties that already nominated and established that focal point. This also be established just to ensure that there's a harmonization, effectiveness, and efficiency in fulfilling the obligation under the BWC. Last but not least, last year, the UNIDIR and the VERTIC have also developed the database on national implementation measures, which also enhance the confidence building as well among the state. Furthermore, I wish also to highlight that during the engagement, the Friends of the Share received several proposals, which is very useful from state parties in order to enhancing the effectiveness of national implementation. These include revisiting the CBM Form E, whether it still remains fit for purpose or whether it could be amended or expanded with the view to building up a clearer picture of approaches of national implementation. We also received some suggestions regarding the voluntary peer review, transparency, and implementation review initiatives. We also have the proposal to streamline BWC implementation measure and the implementation measure of other related instruments or to introduce the model laws on that. Last but not least, on behalf of the Friends of the Share on this topic, we remain committed to take on all comments from the working papers and from the discussion, as well as whether it's going to be written or the view expressed during the discussion. And we looking forward to have a discussion with the state parties in informal format or also in the formal format, especially during the next session of the working paper of the working group. Thank you. Back to you, Jamie.
Many thanks, Atakan, and thank you also to your fellow friends of the chair as well for input and your work. I think it's really useful to outline that broadening of national implementation measures and that sort of change over time. The point on complementarity of measures is also well noted. And I should also add thanks for the kind mention of the database. I'd now like to turn to our speaker on assistance, response and preparedness, Sophie Callahag. Sophie is the first Secretary on Disarmament at the Permanent Mission of Denmark to the UN in Geneva. And Sophie, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And to begin with, big thanks to UNIDIR and UNODA and the ISU for putting together this event and for the invitation for me to speak. Also, a huge thanks joining others here to Ambassador Meyer for his guidance and leadership on this. I'm very pleased to provide an update on assistance, preparedness and response on behalf of myself as co-friend of the chair, together with Mr. Angel Dalmazo, from the Permanent Mission of Argentina. I would like to first begin with providing a bit of background and then taking stock on where this working group is on this topic. So to begin with, just to refresh our minds, Article 7 of the Convention, which speaks about assistance, preparedness and response and preparedness, provides that each state party to the Convention undertakes to provide or support assistance in accordance with the United Nations Charter to any party to the Convention which requests, if the Security Council decides that such a party has been exposed to danger as a result of a violation of the Convention. This article provides no procedures for states parties to request assistance, nor for the international community to deliver it. Additionally, since Article 7 has never been invoked, no relevant practice exists in relation to its implementation. However, states parties have reached several additional understandings and agreements at previous review conferences on Article 7 of the Convention. Additionally, states parties have considered a number of topics in relation to Article 7 during previous intersessional programs and also reached a number of common understandings there. Now, with regard to this working group, during this working group, the topic has been allocated 7 days for discussion between 2023 and 2026, 4 days in 2024, 2 days in 2025, and 1 day in 2026, which means that the next time the working group will be discussing this topic will be for 2 days in December 2025. Now, so far during this working group, the following broad topics and categories for proposals have been put forward by states parties for the consideration of the working group with regards to assistance, response, and preparedness under Article 7. Setting up mobile biomedical units, either nationally based or under the BWC. Developing voluntary guidelines or procedures for submitting an Article 7 request. Establishing an Article 7 database. Conducting practical exercises to ensure readiness and to test the operationalization of capacities of states parties to respond to events and to deliver assistance or protection to states parties that may have been affected by the use of biological weapons, and enhancing collaboration between relevant organizations, be it internationally, regionally, or locally. The Friends of the Chair have been examining the proposals made by states parties and have conducted bilateral and joint consultations over the last couple of years. While some proposals have gained broad support, others have required further work to advance possible consensus. Now, ahead of the working group session in December 2024, the Friends of the Chair prepared a non-paper reflecting the personal views of the Friends of the Chair, aiming to provide a basis for further discussion on the identification, examination, and development of consensus-based measures and recommendations on assistance, preparedness, and response. And during the December discussions, it became evident that certain issues do remain unsolved. Notably, several delegations highlighted the need to further explore the relationship between this article, Article 7, and Article 10, to enhance coordination and avoid duplication, and to look at potential budgetary implications of some of the proposed measures. The Friends of the Chair are now working with the Chair to further advance the work of the topic for the BWC group this year, as also outlined by the Chair. And we, myself and Mr. Angel Dalmazo, are of the Permanent Mission of Argentina, are always ready and stand at your disposal to have consultations. So do reach out if you have any questions. Don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you very much, Jamie. Over to you.
Many thanks, Sophie, for taking the time to join us, and also to Angel for his input as well as the Friend of the Chair. We have one more speaker before we get to questions, so I'd encourage you to continue to submit those. But for now, I'm delighted to hand the floor to Mr. Namioka Daisuke, who is the Deputy Chief of Mission and Minister with the Delegation of Japan to the Conference of Disarmament, and also friend of the Chair on Organizational, Institutional and Financial Arrangements. Mr. Namioka, the screen is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Jamie, for your kind introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. As a member of a Friends of Chair on organizational, institutional, and financial arrangements, I'm working with my colleague, Mr. Arsen Omalov of Kazakhstan and Mr. Hussein Ahmed of Pakistan, under the skillful guidance by the Chair, Ambassador Mayer. So today, let me talk a little bit about our mandate and the current operations and the future work plan. First of all, our mandate of my team. In accordance with the mandate given by the 9th Review Conference, the aim of our working group is to identify, examine, and develop specific and effective measures, including possible legally binding measures, and to make recommendations to strengthen and institutionalize the convention in all its aspects. And the topic of our team, that is measures on organizational and institutional and financial arrangements, is a cross-cutting theme that interacts all other topics with of the working group. Now, the role of this Friends of the Chair on this cross-cutting topic is to aid state parties in their constellations of organizational, institutional, and financial implications of the measures being proposed or considered in the working group, with an aim to strengthen, of course, the convention. Now, regarding our current operation, so far, we have had 2 working days to discuss this issue since back with 2023. And in 2023, we had a panel discussion based on the presentation by the Implementation Support Unit, also known as ISU, on its organization, systems, and finances. And in back 2024, we had detailed discussions within the both formal and informal sessions. And number one, the current issues and consideration regarding our topic can be organized in the following 3 categories. First, of course, the 2 mechanisms, the International Cooperation and Assistance, ICA, and Science Technology Review, SNT. And second, the proposals from state parties and the topic of organizational, institutional, and financial arrangements of the BWC. And third, the proposals falling under the other 6 topics of working group, which have implications of the organizational, institutional, and financial aspects of the convention. Now, we received working papers from several countries, which enriched our discussions. Now, number 3, our future work plan. The final report of the 9th Review Conference states that the working group will adopt a report by consensus that includes conclusions and recommendations according to its mandate. The adopted report will be submitted to state parties for their consideration at the 10th Review Conference to decide on any further action. So we are now working on the draft reports to develop our topic based on our discussions, and are also considering the implications of progress of the 2 mechanisms and the other 6 topics of the working group. Now, I thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any question on this subject matter, my friends, and the most reliable colleague, Mr. Arsen Omalov of Kazakhstan, I will be happy to respond. And regarding a technical question, let me ask the ISU to assist in responding. So back to you, Jamie. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Namioka. Okay, and also thanks, of course, to Arsen and Hushan as well for their input. Arsen, did you want to take the floor at all at this point, or are you waiting for any questions? Yep. Please go ahead.
I will wait.
Okay.
Q&A.
Okay, we've had a couple of questions and some more are starting to trickle in. The floor is also open to any further questions that colleagues may have if you want to enter those into the chat. But if I can start with perhaps clustering two questions which have emerged, and I think some of our panelists have provided written responses, but perhaps I can put these together. And they link to the role of actors other than states. So we have one question on how civil society organizations can best support states parties during the working group and beyond, what could be done there. And then a second question on what concrete steps could be taken to enhance meaningful observer participation and what practices from other arms control and disarmament processes could be applied to enhance inclusivity. It's open to all our panelists if anybody would like to take any of those at all. The screen is open. Thomas, please go ahead.
Sure, Jamie. If nobody else wants to speak to it, I'll tackle this question on civil society, since I also typed a response into the Q&A piece. So in line with what I conveyed in writing, I believe that civil society, international organizations of an intergovernmental nature, as well as the private sector, all these actors, I believe, have an important role to play when it comes to the sphere of biology and biological weapons as well, because states no longer have monopoly in this field. We all know that technological developments are happening so rapid that one could conceivably produce a biological weapon or a toxin in a fairly contained environment. One doesn't have to do a Manhattan Project these days to produce these kinds of weapons, for one thing. So that means we have to get the buy-in of the non-governmental sector to implement the convention. And specifically when it comes to international cooperation and assistance, we know the private sector has particular expertise that is already being employed when we have them as implementing partners for international cooperation and assistance. I just mentioned one example. We have civil society helping out with drafting legislation to implement the convention domestically, etc. There are many other spheres where civil society and non-state actors play a role, and of course, we also know that intergovernmental organizations have significant resources and competencies when it comes to these matters as well. So my full support. How do you do it? Well, in an ideal world, you let them participate in the working group, but of course also seminars and activities outside the working group are helpful in terms of evolving those actors. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for kicking off the responses. I may come back to you with a specific question that was directed to you on international cooperation. But before doing that, I'd be quite keen to get the views of other panelists, other speakers on the role of civil society and potential roles to enhance inclusivity within the BWC. This is a question about enhancing meaningful observer participation as well. I've also seen a question on related to AI as well, which has just emerged, and I'll read this out for you. So. AI presents both opportunities and challenges for compliance and implementation of the BWC, particularly in the absence of a formal verification mechanism. How can AI-driven technologies enhance transparency monitoring and threat detection? I think perhaps, Peter, given you are the person dealing with S&T, perhaps I could throw this to you along with the question of civil society or observer participation. Peter, if you're there, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Jamie. You can hear me? Yeah, so Jamie, personally, I think when we think about AI, we shouldn't think about it like a kind of genie in the, with the like a magic solution to something. AI does not replace the need for human beings. Personally, I feel like we haven't yet gotten to that point where AI can replace humans and solve problems. But what it can do, it can augment human processes. For example, in many countries, you have issues to do with human resource and technical capacity. AI can be a game changer in upskilling. It can reduce technical barriers for a lot of experts or scientists, or like, for example, if you have disease investigators that have to comb through case reports of over 300 or 400 contacts or contacts of contacts, AI could help you quickly prioritize which ones seem to be most need for human intervention or for human review. Of course, that needs us to get to a point where the reliability of these kinds of users of AI are at a very high level, because AI they have the bias from how they were trained, and they also have times when they lie to us or they really make up stuff. So we would need to do heavy research into that. But once they are reliable, they could help reduce a lot of work at that level, especially in our field with biological weapons convention. If we really wanted to do work around verification that involves people to review a lot of documentation and reports, photos and things like that, AI could play a very huge role in doing some of these scans and at least helping prioritize what things need a human being to look at. When you also go deeper, AI can help people skill up very fast. It can help with turnover. Like, for example, we've seen in our work with epidemics, we usually have issues whereby if you build a very large workforce, then when the outbreak is over, then you have to let them all go. And by the time the next outbreak comes, you may have to train a whole new workforce. So using AI tools could help lower the barrier, at least for a lot of new trainees, to pick up some skills, knowledge, especially if it's more of like a question answer probing way rather than just didactically receiving information. So we have to also remember that we have to protect our data when using AI. We have to protect people's intellectual property when using AI. And as much as possible, though it's a sticky issue, we have to find ways of reasonably attributing what percentage of our efforts relied on human intervention and what percentage relied on AIs, such that if any problem comes downstream, we can appropriately identify where the issue was and hence make the AIs more useful to us. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Peter. I can see screens are being unblanked. And I think, Laurent, you raised your hand. Did you want to take this? I also saw Bas. Please, Laurent, go ahead.
I can add one consideration regarding civil society participation, but that will be more in my national capacity than a friend of the chair. I think that civil society is a very broad term. It covers many types of actors, and often we think about NGOs. I think that when you compare processes, and for those of us who do disarmament across the board, there's something very specific in civil society participation in the BWC, which tends to be much more expert-led, academia-led, and far less advocacy type of civil society participation. And I think that that type of participation has been very not only useful for the BWC, but it will become even more important going forward. I think one of the things that we've seen in the discussion over the past few years is just give one example, is the importance of S&T developments. And I think that being able to rely on the expertise both of academia, of the private sector in that domain is something that would be necessary for the work being undertaken in the context of the BWC. How do we do this? I think there are different ways, but I think that as we go forward, and especially if when we establish, for instance, an S&T mechanism, it will be important that there is flexibility in that mechanism so that the expertise that is not or difficult to be found in government can be drawn upon as part of the work of the S&T mechanism. So I think that it's been important so far, it's been very useful so far, but it will be even more significant and important to include those actors as the convention moves forward, and with a view to strengthen the BWC, if that is useful.
Thank you, Laurent. Bas, I think you raised your hand. There's a civil society question, then there's AI verification question. Over to you as to how you want to take those.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. And indeed, it took me a few minutes to find the hand, but it was raised, and I'm happy to answer both. I'll start with civil society. I very much agree with what has been said already. I think the expertise of civil society, of private sector stakeholders is invaluable to our discussion at the BWC. But sadly, it's been difficult to integrate that expertise in the formal plenaries. Having said that, at the same time, I think there are multiple opportunities to still work with that expertise. So we've had very good experiences consulting with several civil society actors and organizations in getting our own food for thought together and in preparing for the meeting. And I agree also with what Laurent said about the general nature of what we're looking for, because in many ways, and especially when you talk about compliance and verification, we're often talking about very complicated developments in a landscape that we as diplomats can't claim to understand. So we very much rely on them, even if it doesn't show directly in the meetings, in the plenaries. There's plenty of space to help with ideation and developing ideas and finding blind spots. So that has been, I think, a very rewarding process, and we will continue to do so, and our door is always open to have those types of conversations in various settings. On AI, I think as Peter summed it up, I think you should see it as a tool. These technological advancements indeed bring about some new challenges about the way we want to look at compliance in the context of the BWC, and also offer some opportunities to use new tools that weren't available back in the VEREX time or even before that. So I very much think that AI should be a part of that discussion. At the same time, I very much agree also with Peter. AI by itself isn't a magic bullet or a magic fix to suddenly understand it all. It's just a tool that enables us to work faster and possibly more accurately, and maybe to do more with less. And that plays back into those questions that I put on the table before about technical feasibility and also financial sustainability. So in layman terms, a cheaper and easier way to do it, but only if we put it into the right context and are able to employ it in a way that is meaningful. Thanks.
Many thanks, Bas. I think I'd echo those points on AI and compliance and verification. I think, as Peter pointed out, it's not a genie, so there is a need for caution and realism in regard to this. I can see Angel and then Athikan, you put your screen on, and then perhaps I could turn back to Thomas on a question which is directed to him. But Angel, please, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jamie, and I will be very brief because I will join others in. So this is about civil society and the role they play in our work. And I wanted to say, yes, it is in my view, it is a very important role that they play, and they are expected to play. It includes not only expert input and advocacy, it has been pointed out, but it also adds levels of transparency and accountability to our work regarding the needs of the global community. So in that regard, that is one thing. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight is that there is also within the civil society think tanks, academia, that play an important scientific role as an interface between them and decision-making and diplomats and governments. So just to wrap up, to say, yes, it is a very important role, and we really appreciate their role. Thank you.
Many thanks, Angel. Athikan, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. I try to not duplicate the answer, so I wish to subscribe to what have been said already. And I also wish to add up that in the meeting of the working group on strengthening of the BWC, we also have the joint statement, the cross-regional one, that highlights on the value of the participation of the civil society in this process. And Furthermore, when we see the civil society, we can see the various organizations, as Kohong already said. And for the experience of developing country and least developing country, I think civil society, especially academia and also other CSO, also play a critical role in filling technological gaps for developing country, just to see how they could develop further and how they could enhance their cooperation assistance when it's come to the national implementation. So I wish also to touch a little bit on the question on the AI. Of course, I totally agree it's not the magic word. And as I presented in my earlier presentation, the BWC have to evolve and the national implementation have to evolve according to the new challenging. So I think some of the suggestion that we got also is just to develop the code of conduct to cover all emerging issues that related to the implementation of the BWC, and I think AI should be one of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Athakan. Thomas, if I may, could I follow up the question which was directed to you? I don't know whether you'd want to respond, but I'd like to make sure it's reflected. The question on the conclusion there is no connection between the full enjoyment of Article 10 on cooperation assistance and the issue of sanctions. And it points out here that for the view of many states parties, there is an issue with the continued infringement of the undeniable right of some states parties to enjoy international cooperation and assistance. And this is something which the person submitting the question thinks should be dealt with the ICA mechanism. Thomas, there's quite a lot there. I don't know how you want to address it, but I wanted to give you the floor to respond, and I thank the person for putting the question to us as well.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for the question. This is, of course, a particularly sensitive and political issue, so I do emphasize that I speak in my personal capacity here when trying to respond to this question. Now, as I've already indicated in the Q&A, I believe that the differences between member states when it comes to the issue of sanctions are too great to be resolved in this working group. Of course, if we were able to resolve the matter, which I think dogs many international organizations and generally international relations between a good number of states, as we all know. It's way beyond the BWC in my view. But of course, if we could resolve the issue, that would of course be conducive to reaching an agreement on the various matters that we have that we are dealing with in the BWC context, in particular international cooperation and assistance. Of course, as I said, states have diverging views on the issue of sanctions. First of all, there are diverging interpretations in terms of how you read Article 10. In my personal view, it doesn't mean every state has to assist every other state on every matter. As long as states can demonstrate that they do provide international cooperation and assistance, if they're in a position to do so, we should remember is in that article, then I believe states are implementing their obligations. But in any case, we presumably can't have a big legal discussion in terms of what exactly does it mean to implement Article 10 and to what extent would the issue of export controls come into play, which of course are also an obligation under the convention. And then again, sanctions being a different issue from export controls. We know various countries impose economic sanctions on other countries for various reasons, be they what they perceive as human rights violations, unfair economic practices, political differences, etc. Trying to respond to what they perceive as international wrongdoing, etc. This is a huge topic, and I believe it's above our pay grade in the working group to resolve it. That, of course, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking for an off-ramp to I don't know if that's good wording, but to park the issue or defer it for future deliberation beyond what we have available to us in this very limited working group that it is going to finish in 2 years, and we have a few weeks every year to deal with so many issues. I personally believe that the views of states are too far apart to resolve it. Now, we can do exactly what we have done for the last 50 years, bring in all these various super difficult issues that have not been resolved anywhere and try and resolve them in the BWC, which means we're not going to go anywhere in terms of strengthening the convention, and the work will be done outside the BWC context. Or we can look for some kind of off-ramps and, leaving these issues to the bigger bodies than the working group, the meeting of states parties, and more importantly, the review conference, who are the ones who are supposed to deal with these big political issues. Because to be very honest with you, based on what I've seen, what states parties told me, what I've taken in as a friend of the chair is that this issue is so difficult that we cannot even agree on setting up an institutional framework as to how we deal with it. For example, some states want the dispute settlement mechanism, specifically in the BWC context, on how to resolve potential obstacles to ICA when it comes to export controls or sanctions, which, as I said, I see as a much broader issue, as a somewhat different issue that affects many issues outside the convention. And some states also want to review how states provide assistance. And of course, the other view from other states is that no way are they going to be agreeing to setting up a dispute settlement mechanism, nor are they going to be willing to have their Article 10 obligations reviewed by other member states, similar to perhaps a WTO dispute settlement mechanism, which was very difficult to set up and currently has its own problems over there on the WTO side. And those issues are to some extent less controversial than the topic of sanctions, which of course in many countries is also related to domestic issues. For example, when I look at how Canada deals with economic sanctions, which we sometimes use, in response to human rights violations, as I pointed out, or as we all know, I think I can be honest about this, Canada has participated in the imposition of sanctions against Russia following the invasion of Ukraine. There is no way that Canadian delegates sitting at the working group of the BWC, or even sitting in the BWC, would ever be authorized to agree and take away the right of the Canadian Parliament and the political leadership to deal with sanctions issues in the manner they see fit. I would never be able to agree to that. The differences are too far apart. Canada's sanctions policies and legislation will not become subject to adjudication by a multilateral body where all states sit therein. Of course, also those states that are subject to sanctions, and be they lawful or unlawful, of course, they will always speak against export controls and sanctions that affect them. I mean, who would want to submit themselves to these kinds of things? Nobody. So that's already a very long answer, which is way too short to appropriately deal with the issue, but it gives you a flavor. So thank you for the question, and I do my best, but it's a super difficult issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for taking it on. I know it's a wider issue, but it is an issue that has become much, much more important over the last 50 years, and I would envisage it's not going to get easier. So thank you for raising and responding to this, because I think there are a number of strong views indeed. I think it's no secret that it's been a key element of the non-aligned movement position, a consistently principled position on this for many years now. So I think it's good to get those different views. Okay. I just looking through for any other questions. There is a practical question in here which I've received, which relates to, and I think it's perhaps for the state's concern, but for friends of the chair and indeed the chair. But the question when the intersessional work will commence in order to make work towards tangible progress for the 6th session of the working group. And I don't know whether that's one you'd like to take, Ambassador Meyer, or if there's a particular point where people will be reached out to. If not, my other suggestion would be perhaps we could go in reverse order through the friends of the chair. And Peter mentioned the issue of genies. I'd like to ask you, if you were to meet a genie on your relevant agenda item, what would be the one thing that you would specifically like to be done ahead of the next review conference? And perhaps as you're on the screen, if there are, Peter, did you want to follow up on something? Please go ahead, Peter.
I can go after. I wanted to talk about the genie.
Okay, well, perhaps I can turn to you, Athakan, first.
Atikan, please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't hear the question as my connection was disrupted. Sorry, what was the question again?
I can repeat the question until we reestablish the connection with Jamie. So Jamie asked if you could ask one wish to a genie, what would you have done for the working group ahead of the 10th review conference, and any closing thoughts you would like to pose before we close? Thank you.
I wish we could have flexibility and political will to be more engaging, more listening, and try to exercise their spirit of multilateralism. So we could reach to the consensus, and we can strengthen the BWC as we wish. Because as we see, and I quite agree with Jamie that the BWC is one of the treaties that if there weren't in place, it should be one of the first priority of the state that should invent and recreate it and make it happen. Because the BWC itself, it doesn't cover only the traditional security and big concerns like 50 years ago, but now it's expanding towards the threat that unknown to us. And I think while we are going toward that Pandora box, that unknown threat, it would be good that we can gather the useful instrument as much as possible. And I hope that the state can join us in strengthening the BWC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atikan. I will pose the same question now to Arsen and Namyok Hassan, if you'd like to take the floor on your closing remarks.
No, thank you very much for asking that question. And well, it is very clear that for as a member of Friends of the Chair, would like to make utmost deliberation of this quite important matters, not only to, together with the diplomats only, but civil society and even technicians and some technical expert of this biotechnology as well. And I'd like to ask my friend of a friend, Arsen, and if you have a comment present to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arsen. The floor is yours, if you wish to take it.
That's nothing clear, except my friend already said during his opening remarks future work. If you allow me, I would like to just touch upon the AI. Our agenda item is cross-cutting, and the AI as well is cross-cutting nature. Verification and science technology as well, international cooperation. Maybe also to the AI community, terms of AI.
We seem to have some difficulties in hearing you. I don't know if it's only me, but I think that Zoom and technology is not helping us out today very much. But thank you very much, Arsen. We would be happy to post also a recording if of your final thoughts, if you would like to. But in the meantime, if I could now give the floor to Sophie for any final thoughts and final remarks and answer to that genie question, if I may. Well, it seems we continue with the technical difficulties. Apologies for that. So, Bas, could I hand over the floor to you now for your answer to the genie question?
Thanks, and I hope that I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay, good. It depends a bit on how powerful the genie is, of course. If this genie can bring us consensus, then I have some more ambitious wishes than if we're talking about the real world. But just to keep it a little bit modest, I think we would be very much helped with inputs on the food for thought paper that we shared, and just the willingness and openness of delegations to find compromises and to work in the spirit of multilateralism, as Attikar has eloquently said. That would be my wish for compliance and verification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bas. So in continuing in the reverse order, if I may, we're on to Laurent and Angel. Angel, Laurent, if you wish to take the floor on the Gini question and any final thoughts and remarks.
I was looking whether my colleague from Peru is still online, but because I would have gladly let him the floor. But if he's not here, I think I'd be very very brief. And I'm not too sure about the Genicom issue, but from our end, I think that from our specific end, I think that we are in a position that we have a whole set of proposals or possible measures that could be taken forward. And I think now the challenge is to maybe try to move forward and develop convergence on some of them or most of them. And I think that the only thing that we can plan for is that we move forward in support to the chair of the working group, and I guess I can speak on behalf of both my colleague from Peru and myself that we will do our best to do so, but I don't have much else to add at this stage.
Thank you very much, Laurent. If I may follow now with Peter. Peter, you had your hand up, so I'm sure you're eager to take the Gini question.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll be a little selfish and say that out of all the issues that we are dealing with right now, I feel like S&T is the S&T proposal is quite mature compared to many of the others on the table. And I think if we can build momentum on having at least something out or something done, maybe it can build momentum for other things. So I really hope that all the parties to the negotiation can at least find some agreement that the S&T proposal, as it is, really is the best alternative, and will pass it this year. So that's my wish to the Gini.
Thank you very much, Peter. And last but not least, if I may give the floor to Ambassador Mayer for his final comments after hearing from his fellow friends of the chair and perhaps an answer to the Gini question. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, Genies don't exist, but if we can ask something from the Gene, I will be unemployed. But I would like not to be discussing any convention, anything on weapons. I would wish to the Gene that we would live in a world totally disarmed. That's my wish. No biological, no chemical, no nuclear, no small, no big, just no weapons. That's my wish to the Gene.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That has to be a very powerful Genie, I guess. But I just realized, I'm really sorry, Thomas, I missed you before. So if you would like to take the floor for your final remarks, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I want to thank, of course, the organizers once again and all the participants for their questions and interaction. As I said, some of these issues are extremely difficult, and sometimes it may appear when we, as friends of the chair, come up with compromise proposals and suggestions that we are not hearing everyone. And that, of course, is not a matter of disrespect. That's just, in my case, my own personal judgment as to how far we can go in making proposals that might lead us to something that might work. And as I said in my introductory discussions, others have set up mechanisms to provide for international cooperation and assistance. And to be honest with you, while I have a lot of sympathy and respect for those who are targeted by economic measures, none of these other mechanisms have been able to resolve these big political issues. So, as I suggest, that the BWC will probably be not the body finding the magic genie and the magic trick to resolve these issues. That said, as I mentioned previously, we should not close the door to further discussion and elaboration of real concerns, and seeing if we can perhaps find elements of a solution. But I suspect within the limited mandate, resources and time we have for this working group, the magic genie probably won't appear in the room and resolve all these issues. But that doesn't mean that we cannot do some good, some strengthening of the convention with the efforts that we have made to date. As I flagged, the Friends of the Chair have submitted their paper, and the Chair has made some revisions to that paper, and we believe in the wisdom of our Chair to bring us to a successful conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I think that is a great way to wrap up our session. On behalf of UNIDIR, I apologize for the technical issues that we had in this call. But before closing, if I could encourage you all to complete our brief feedback form. It takes a couple of minutes, it's anonymous, and it helps us greatly improving our events moving forward. I put the link in the chat for you to follow that. And for those interested in BWC-related meetings, if I could point you to the 50th anniversary event that our UNODA colleagues organized last week. There is a link that we will post in the chat on this as well. And I would like to close this by thanking the Chair, Ambassador Mayer, and all of the Friends of the Chair for joining us today, providing your insights, your perspectives. And thanks as well to our UNIDIR team who produced this event. And thanks to those that have funded UNIDIR work on BWC-related issues over the last years, including the US, France, the UK, the latter of whom funded the BWC Advanced Education course, which some participants of which are joining this event today. So I hope you have a good rest of your day and hope to see you in our next UNIDIR events and around the Palais. Thank you so much, and until next time.